journey down the rabbit hole of rock and roll's past, present, and future. It's Barstool Rockers with your hosts, Jim Finn and Dan Michaels.
A good Friday to everybody, and it's April 5th. And the reason I'm giving you the date is because this marks the 25th anniversary of the passing of one of rock's legendary frontmen, Kurt Cobain. And we were kind of talking before we started recording here about the day you found out Kurt Cobain had passed away, and just what a shock and what a stunner it was. And I was thinking, how many people have passed and we have found out and then had to be on the radio to discuss it? Because that's a huge one when you try to break that kind of thing to an audience. You know, you found out about Kurt from a mutual friend of ours when you were working in Madison. And I think back to seeing, the UPI teletype when that was a thing, the rattle trap that sat in the next studio when Freddie Mercury passed away, or Brad Delp or anybody like that. When you have to go on the air and you have to bring these things. And in this format, what we do, it's almost like being a deacon in the church. You're going up there and you're helping to present the gospel to the parishioners a lot of the time.
Well, and because it's rock and roll, we've had a lot of those. We've had a lot of those tragic deaths, whether it's been someone that has taken their own life or...
Well, in 2016, we just got numb to them. So anyway, we bring that up because you had a chance recently to talk to Danny Goldberg, the band's former manager, and he was one of the last people to talk to Kurt and to have any interaction with him. In fact, Courtney invited him to be part of an intervention before his passing. So
he talks a lot about his relationship with Kurt in the book, and we only had a short time to chat. And I even said to him at the end of the interview, "Wow, I wish I had more time because there's a whole bunch of questions that I have for you." But yeah, he gave us a lot of insight into Kurt Cobain and his days managing Nirvana.
So let's check that out now.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Danny?
Good, thank you.
Danny Goldberg is the president and owner of Gold Village Entertainment, an artist management company. He is the author of a new book, a fascinating new book entitled Serving the Servant, Remembering Kurt Cobain. And Danny was a music manager for Nirvana during that crucial point in their career, right around the time when Nevermind broke. How did your involvement with Nirvana start, Danny?
I had a management company in those days called Gold Mountain, and we had older artists like Bonnie Raitt and the Allman Brothers Band. I knew there was a new energy in rock and roll. I hired a younger guy named John Silva, who today is a very successful manager of the Foo Fighters and others, and we signed Sonic Youth, who were kind of the gold standard in the indie world, and then through Sonic Youth met Nirvana. And they came to my office in November of 1990 after their first indie record, Bleach, had come out, and they'd already written, Kurt, I might say, had already written some of the songs that were going to be on Nevermind, and they wanted to be on a major label and get management. So initially I just did it because Sonic Youth told me they were good, and then a few months after that decision I saw them live in L.A. because Kurt wanted to work out some of the material that was going to be on Nevermind in front of a live audience. And that's when I really had the epiphany that he was a much bigger deal than I'd realized, was a real genius at connecting with an audience. He had this way of making you feel he was talking just to you from a stage, had this combination of sensitivity and power. So after I saw them live, I really became obsessed. And, a few months after that, Nevermind came out, and the whole rock and roll world became obsessed.
And the book really sheds some new perspective on Kurt, who remains an icon 25 years after his death. A lot of people think of him as this broken soul who was caught in a downward spiral of depression. You describe it in the book, Serving the Servant, Remembering Kurt Cobain. But he was a much more complicated man than just being this character that was steeped in depression. How do you remember Kurt?
Well, as you say, he was complicated. He was prone to depression. He did and had been long before he was famous. He had a tough childhood and never got over some of it. And he had done heroin long before he was famous, although, of course, it's a lot easier to get it after you're famous. But he was also a real-life creative genius. He had a tremendous work ethic, cared greatly about his art, made sure the band rehearsed rigorously before they went to the studio on any record. He storyboarded all the videos and oversaw the editing of them. He designed the album covers. He made all the decisions for the band. He had this real vision of what it was to be a rock star, but on his own terms. He wanted to be faithful to these punk rock values, feminism and egalitarianism and caring about the underdog and kind of a contempt for mainstream commercial culture. At the same time, he admired the Beatles and Cheap Trick and other artists, and he wrote choruses that you could hum and guitar solos that you could play air guitar to. So he was a very warm guy to the people around him, certainly very warm to me, with a great sense of humor and an enormous amount of sweetness that was as much a part of his life as the depressions were. And when I spoke to people for the book, because I didn't want to only rely on my own memories and my files, I spoke to 40 people that I worked with closely during those years and that knew him during those years. Yeah. Everybody had a sweet memory of him. He was a very loving, nourishing guy whose darkness was only inner-directed, never directed at other people. So I feel that somehow the public perception of him became overly preoccupied with his dark side and his death. And it is such a tragedy, and it was so grotesque. But I wanted to share my experiences, which include that. I can't ignore the drug problems or the depressions or his death, but that's not the main topic of the book. The main topic of the book is how brilliant he was, how artfully he navigated through a lot of complicated things in the culture and did it with ethics and integrity and kindness, while still grappling with those demons.
And kudos to you, because that really comes through in the book. Now, when Nevermind broke, it really changed the entire rock and roll landscape at that time. It became such a massive hit. How did each member of the band, because you were managing the band at the time, how did each member of the band react to that instant success?
Well, the main reaction was they just sort of stayed in their lane. None of them started going to Hollywood parties or buying expensive cars or fashion designer clothes or going out with models or anything like that. They stayed who they were. They stayed close to their older friends. They stayed in the zone, and they were working. They were touring. They were in the middle of being artists, so they were in a way insulated from the reaction to the art. I was closer to Kurt than I was to the other two guys, and I think that he had mixed feelings about success. He wanted to be successful. He was driven to do it. He paid attention to every detail, to every interview, to every interaction with people in the business and to audiences, to the sound of the records, to the videos, and all that sort of a thing. But he didn't like some of the results. He didn't like the loss of privacy, and especially later on, he really came to hate the scrutiny of his personal life. So, on the other hand, he never stopped wanting to have hits. Everything he did, he wanted it to be successful because that was part of the art form of being a rock artist to him. He was not just a punk artist. He loved punk rock, but he also transcended it.
Do you feel like, because you were so close to him, do you feel like he had a major struggle with that fame once it happened for him?
I don't know. That's sort of a lot of, the mythology is, gee, did fame kill Kurt Cobain? Again, he was prone to depression long before he was famous. He was doing heroin long before he was famous. He had two family members, distant family members, but still biologically related, that had killed themselves. I don't think fame was the reason. I think it was part of the context. He was famous by design. He wanted to be successful, and that included being famous. He didn't... Again, he didn't do the things that other famous people do. You wouldn't see him on somebody's yacht on the Riviera or something like that. But he cared about the videos. He wanted people to see them, and he knew that they were on television. I think that his demons were inside him, not externally caused. I'm not sure that fame particularly helped, but I don't see it as a cause. I feel there are mysterious reasons why some people kill themselves. Nobody really knows why. Anybody who's been friends with someone who did it knows the mystery of it and the horror of it. Psychiatrists and philosophers and religious leaders and yogis. None of them have been able to figure this out and stop people from doing it. I think 50,000 Americans every year kill themselves. 3/4 of them are male, half of them with guns. And so I think fame was part of his life, but I don't particularly blame it for his death.
I can't believe it's been 25 years. That's crazy.
Well, that's the whole thing about getting older, man. I can't believe it either, but it's apparently true.
And I remember back in the day, I remember that when they opened the door, they opened Pandora's box with grunge music back in the day. Do you think, because was there really a battle between Kurt and Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam?
Oh, there wasn't a battle. I mean,
did the media just kind of blow that out of proportion?
Well, listen, Kurt was competitive, and he did say things. He did say things about Pearl Jam in a Rolling Stone article that were not very nice, and it really came from Kurt. It was kind of a petulant competitiveness because Pearl Jam did become as successful, and by some metrics, more successful on the follow-up record, and there was a certain rivalry there that was on his mind. But personally, he really liked Eddie Vedder, and it was never personal. And when they met, it was always warm because they shared so much in the way of values. But he did like being number one. He didn't want to be number two.
If the tragedy hadn't happened, where do you think Kurt would be today?
Well, I'm sure he would be doing something creative. He was an artist at his core, a graphic artist as well as a musical artist. I doubt he'd be just repeating himself and making records that sounded like the early Nirvana records. There's no way of knowing, of course, but a lot of people close to Kurt think of him in kind of the same category as someone like Neil Young, who's able to periodically reunite with former bandmates and also does his own thing. I think that same with Dave Grohl. Obviously had a lot of talents that he couldn't express in the context of Nirvana. So my guess, and it's just a guess, is that he would have been doing a lot of different things creatively in different musical languages, and then from time to time Nirvana would do things together as well, because they made a certain sound together and had a certain energy together that was unique. But Kurt had a lot going on inside his head creatively, not all of which could be expressed in the context of Nirvana.
The new book is called Serving the Servant, Remembering Kurt Cobain. Danny, I know you are on a tight schedule this morning, talking with a lot of other people, so thank you for the book and hope to talk to you soon.
I'm easy to get a hold of, and I'm so grateful to talk to you and to your audience.
All right. Thank you, Danny. Have a good day now.
He seems like a reverent guy when it comes to talking about Kurt, and he seems like he has just a wealth of information and what kept Kurt going and what propelled him.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about where Kurt would be now if he were still with us. And yeah, I totally agree. He would still be burning that creative flame, and even if it wasn't in music. But of course, you and I think we're roughly about the same age.
We've never discussed the details of the age.
Exact details, but we're close.
Yeah, probably.
So we both remember the 90s very well.
Oh, yeah.
The flannel, the ripped jeans, and the Doc Martens.
Dude, I was wearing flannel in the 70s because I had to, because we didn't have a lot of money, so it kept us warm.
It came back full circle in the 90s, though, with the grunge scene. And yeah, so, wow. Nirvana, when that album, when Nevermind broke, how huge.
Yeah, it destroyed hair metal.
Hair metal was gone.
Kurt Cobain single-handedly destroyed hair metal. Now, a lot of it's, made its comeback. We have the Poisons and Warrants and everybody now, and it's great to celebrate them again. But yeah, that completely changed the landscape.
Whole musical landscape. Yeah, so our thanks to Danny Goldberg for taking some time out to chat with us about this sad anniversary of the passing of Kurt Cobain.
Check out that book, and our thanks to you, the listeners, for tuning in today. And please, if you get a chance, we invite you to share this with other people and help get the word around. Like we always say, our goal is to go from tens to hundreds of listeners, and maybe someday have 1,000 episode download day. God,
that would
be awesome.
be nice.
That'd just be amazing. But, thanks for checking it out. It's barstoolrockers.com. Of course, you can get it at Spotify. You can get it at iTunes, where we will invite you to rate and review it. Give it 5 stars. That helps. You can also get it on the iHeartRadio app. That's the mothership's propeller of all things good. That's what sends the nutrition to all.
Yes.
And, of course, thanks to Anastasia Vishnevsky for the music that sets the table for us.
Thank you.